Welcome to the Intuitive Therapist Podcast with Janis R. Cohen, therapist, clairvoyant, empath, and medium. Listen in as she takes a no-nonsense deep dive into real human struggles and how to resolve them. Janis will share channeled information from her spirit guide team, as well as the angels and archangels, to help you master your emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual destiny. And now, Janis R. Cohen.
Hey y'all, this is Janis Cohen, the Intuitive Therapist here on the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. You know, every literary story has key players in it. And two that are important for today's episode are the protagonist and the antagonist. So I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with who each is, but I'm just going to kind of give you a definition just so you can understand that I'm going to be referencing these two players. The protagonist is the main character or hero, the essential player in the story. And this is a person that's who your focus is on, the person you want to invest in and really care about. And the protagonist must possess redeemable human foibles, potentially heroic qualities that emerge in the climax, and someone who becomes different, better, and stronger by the end of the story. The antagonist, on the other hand, this is the villain, the character that opposes and undermines the protagonist. The antagonist has to have a realistic and sympathetic backstory, though. The antagonist must exhibit power, force the protagonist to make difficult choices, and cause the protagonist to grow. If you've listened to this podcast for long enough, then you know how much I focus on growth and expansion and learning your soul's lessons and shifting your mindset from helplessness to resourcefulness. So today's episode is no different. Look, I believe in the capacity of people to change their lives. I believe in helping people see how minor shifts in their focus, beliefs, and actions can create massive results. I believe that everyone wants to feel good about who they are, what they accomplish, and how they show up for themselves and for others. I believe in the good in people. I believe that everybody has the ability to change the narrative of their life and forge ahead with a redefined self, a powerful self, an evolved self, a self that supports the greater good. I believe in the goodness of the soul. And it's not often that a person is asked to tell their life story. And I mean, really tell it, the truth of it. When a person is asked to share their story, the story of their life, most people begin with kind of like the current facts about themselves. Like, I'm married or I'm single. This is the job I do. I live here. I'm this old. I have 3, 4, 5 brothers, sisters. But that's just the fluff, okay? The real story exists below those facts, okay? The real story is in the experiences that they've had and who they've become because of those experiences. Their self-definition and their story go hand in hand. And most significantly, in my opinion, is whether they see themselves as the protagonist or the antagonist in their own life narrative. I don't think most people really look at that, right? Having worked in the mental health field for as long as I have, almost over 30 years, and because of how much life I've lived, one thing I know is that underneath any hype of I'm in a good place in my life lives the belief that struggles and pain define who we are, that's our self-definition. And unfortunately, this self-definition stops kind of right there for most people. When a person recalls the difficulties in their life as a means to describe who they are in totality. So many people, unfortunately, live in that space, the space of, I've been through a lot. I've suffered a lot of stuff. I've been in pain a lot in my life. I've lost a great deal. I've been hurt a lot. And they give themselves permission to be the damsel in distress of their life narrative, as if there's no other choice. And unless you've done some real work on yourself, y'all, and dealt with the shadow parts of who you are, faced your own inner demons, and made new agreements with yourself, it's likely that you too fall into the category of the person that I just described. And I'm not judging you, I'm just saying it's just the truth. So when I was in college, I had a very dear friend who hung out with a really unique crowd. I loved her. She was a sweet girl. But, she hung out with some funky people. And some people would kind of call that crowd a bunch of misfits, right? Nonetheless, she found her tribe and felt that she belonged with them, which is fantastic. Most of us feel like we're searching for that community, but she found it. And I noticed even back then that she tended to complain about how things never worked out in her favor. And while she was and is a really sweet and good human being, interestingly enough, she continues to live in that state of lack, negativity, and helplessness over, 40 years later. And because of all the inner work that I've done, and because I've helped so many people do their inner work and help them come out on the other side of pain and struggle, I know that staying in a dark, helpless, and resourceless place, it is a choice. It's a choice how you see your life. And in regards to this woman I mentioned, and several other women who've been in my life over time, and who tend to reinforce their own disadvantage, none of them have invested in changing themselves or doing the work. Life has happened to them, and they don't feel like life happens for them. Their story is negative, they're complaining a lot, and they live in the quicksand of their lives more often than not. And it's really hard to watch. And actually, before I knew better not to get caught up in trying to help them, me, the helper, I would get sucked into their complaining. And I didn't realize they had no desire to change or improve their lives. They just kept reinforcing the story. It was an endless loop. And I had to make a choice to distance myself so that I could continue to move forward. I needed to be the protagonist in my story. And when I first thought about talking about this with you, I was on the heels of the full moon that we just had on the 16th of this month, a most promising full moon in Leo that announced all good things coming to us and where we have the choice of how we see ourselves in the story of our lives. That was what this full moon was about, what you're willing to let go of, what you're willing to embrace, and how you're willing to show up in Leo energy. And I'd really like you to be honest with yourself right now. If someone were to ask you to describe your life, what would you say? What story would you tell? What things would you reference? What events would you include? What timestamps do you define yourself by? What events happened that changed who you are? What people influenced your worldview and the view of yourself? What did you accomplish? What do you regret not accomplishing or having in your life? What keeps you stuck? Why haven't you solved that already? Are you the protagonist in your life story, or are you the antagonist, working against yourself? Is there a better story that you could tell about your life that positions you in a better light with yourself? In all honesty, it's time that you no longer tell your story with a backdrop of what you've been through, right? We know that our life experiences make us who we are, but it's what we do with those life experiences that help us become who we need to be. So rather, you need to realize that you have a choice all of the time about the story you tell, about who you are in your life, and how you define yourself in your own story. You always have the choice to tell your story from a perspective of a person who's brave, strong, unwavering. Your story can be void of the baggage you've carried all of your life. Do you realize that? It's not the emblem, your baggage. It's not the emblem that you should really carry around. Put your baggage down. You can truly set it down and walk lighter through life. It's a choice. Your story of pain doesn't have to be the only descriptive factors of who you are. Does this make sense? And it's time to admit to yourself, you are not your wounds. I think people don't freaking get that. Again, your wounds are not your emblems. They're not the things that you need to be so freaking proud about. You can shift the narrative from victim to victor, from someone who has not just survived, but somebody who's thrived, someone who overcame obstacles, not somebody who just tripped over them and just went from one pile of shit to the next, and that's your story. Someone who learned about who he or she is, not someone who kept their head in the sand, afraid to deal with the undesirable aspects of themselves. Someone who dealt directly with adversity, not somebody who avoided it like the plague. You get to tell a story about who you are, not just parts of it. You can do that, but that's not a real accurate representation of the truth of who you are. You get to tell the whole damn story, and you get to emphasize the parts that you want to emphasize. So think about what you want to emphasize. That's my point. You choose how you represent yourself to yourself in the world. I wonder what you would think of somebody who told your story the way you tell it. Would you find them attractive, impressive, powerful, innovative, accomplished, happy? No one is devoid of the opportunity to rewrite their personal narrative. No one is incapable of becoming the protagonist in their own story. It's a choice. Everything is a choice, a conscious choice to flip the script. Get out of negativity. Get out of lack mindset. Get out of helplessness. Just get the F out of all of that. And I promise that you will begin to get rid of the shame you carry, or the regret, or the guilt, or whatever it is that you keep holding on to, this whole idea that you just can't win for losing, right? For believing those things, that you aren't enough for yourself or anyone else, or for the things that you want in your life. I promise that if you choose to focus on your accomplishments, your victories, your capacity to pivot and move forward, your ability to find goodness and value in whatever you experience, you can rewrite your story in a matter of a decision. One single decision. One single decision can change your life. I beg you, look at how you tell your story. What do you reference? I beg you to change how you show up in your story if the story you tell creates a narrative of somebody who can't help themselves. You aren't helpless. Nobody is. I don't doubt that we all have our challenges and that we all experience kind of some downtroddenness. I don't doubt that. But that's not the totality of who you are. It's time you believe that. It's time that you started to tell that story, the story of how you overcame, what you've learned, who you've become, that you are more powerful than you could possibly know. You just need to start stepping into that. And incrementally, with each word you carefully choose to speak about your life, every strategic action you take to reinforce this new and revitalized and strong version of yourself, right? This new, resilient, brave, bountiful, and humble version of who you are, who has been blessed by God to exist in your own unique way. You will become this version. None of us are meant to be on this earth to suffer. None of us. Our story begins and ends with us, with our words, with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with our actions, with our perspectives and perceptions, how we choose to perceive things. Your story can be rewritten in any given moment. So I ask that you look at how you represent yourself to yourself. What story are you really telling? Are you the one that steps from one pile of shit to the next? Or are you the one that notices that you've stepped in a pile and you go clean off your shoe and take a different route? Take a moment now, please. Grab a pen, some paper and rewrite your story. Be the protagonist in your story. And you know what? I'll bet that your story would be an inspiration to a lot of people. So today we talked about the fact that, you know what? You have to become this or else. I believe it. If you don't rewrite your story, there's no way you're going to achieve what you want. So who are you really? I wish you a blessed day, a wonderful week, and as always, live intuitively.
Thanks for listening to The Intuitive Therapist. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend, and be sure to give us some stars and a favorable review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in.